Hello everyone and welcome to the channel. I'm Emmanuel, I'm a former Boeing 737 pilot, and welcome to another lesson on the PMDG Boeing 737. Today I want to talk about the interaction between autothrust and the pilots. Now, in flight simulation it is not done very often. In real life it is done all the time, overriding your thrust levers while the autothrottle is engaged. Obviously this is a Boeing topic, not an Airbus topic, since Airbus works quite different in forms of the autothrust. Now, with our autothrottle engaged at the moment, we can see there's an active mode on the flight mode annunciator, and we can see our thrust levers are moving when autothrust commands a different action. However, autothrust also offers us the opportunity to override its inputs. For example, if I'm now moving my thrust lever, you can see I can move it forward or I can pull it backwards just as I like. When I release the thrust levers, autothrust is automatically going to take over again and going to redo whatever it was doing previously. Now, in flight simulation, many people don't make use of that feature at all. In real life, however, we often do. Let me give you an example. You can see I've dialed in 5,000 feet on the MCP, and we're currently maintaining about 10,000. I want to start my descent now, so I'm pressing level change. However, ATC tells us to expedite. You can see autothrust tries to be gentle with the thrust levers and make it easy for passengers. What we would do in the real life is smash our hands on it and just smash the throttles to idle. You can see how quickly the engines are running down now, and that way our descent is initiated a little bit faster. Now, yes, it goes onto the passenger comfort a little bit, but let's be honest, even the slightest turbulence is gonna feel a lot worse than this. Likewise, another feature that another time where we would often override autothrust is when we are flying on a certain speed, which is controlled by the thrust. So let's say, for example, I want to go vertical speed, and I want to do, let's say, 500 feet a minute. Now, the real Boeing 737 autothrust is going to tolerate slight speed differences all the way down to about minus 10 knots. In VNAV, that is most notable, where it has a minus 15 knots tolerance to its descent speed. Now here's what you can do. I've just put on level change. You can see retard is active, so it's pulling the autothrust or the thrust levers back into the idle position. And that is going to give us a certain rate of descent. Now, what we would sometimes do, depending on the situation, is you might just move the thrust levers up a little bit in order to reduce your rate of descent without having to exit the mode. Now, most of us will prefer the vertical speed mode over that. However, just to show you the possibility over there, with autothrust now being in arm mode, you can basically move it around as you like. So, now, let's move thrust levers up a little bit to something like 50% N1. And you can see, with the autothrust in arm mode, the airplane is now going to pitch in order to maintain your speed still. So that gives you a little bit of a control there for your rate of climb and rate of descent while you're flying in level change mode. Likewise, when you were descending in VNAV and your speed would be dropping below the target, we would often go ahead and just increase thrust manually in order to have the speed increase back to the target speed, and then you pull it back into idle thrust so that the target speed is being maintained once again. So these are some situations in which we would override autothrust. However, the most dire situation in which we would do it is when approaching in gusty conditions. Now, despite the Boeing manual saying that the plane is perfectly capable of maintaining speed during turbulent conditions and even flying a little bit faster than it should, the thing is still very slow to respond to gusts. In those conditions, we would often just go ahead and, even with the autothrust engaged, just put our hands on the levers and do your thrust manually. I mean, you're supposed to have the hands on the levers anyway, but nonetheless you would still do your thrust manually and override the autothrottle as applicable. Keeping it on is never a bad idea, as it is going to make your life a little bit easier in case of go-around, because it is automatically going to add thrust, but you get where I'm going. Now, PMDG have actually included a couple of options in the flight management computer that you can use in order to use your hardware to override your autothrust. So the menu is via PMDG setup, options, simulation, and then you go forward a little bit. And in here you've got show thrust lever position when moving, is what I have right now. You can also have it on no, then your hardware thrust lever, so your joystick thrust lever position, is never going to be shown. Or you can have it on yes, then your hardware thrust lever position is always going to be shown. Now let me give you a quick demonstration of that. Let's go to vertical speed mode, and now you can see you've got that little blue bar up there, and this is basically where my joystick throttle now is. Now, personally, I like to have this in the when moving position, because it means I'm getting realistic indications up there, and I can still bring them up for a short time if I want to match my auto thrust setting before disconnecting auto thrust. Now below that is an option, auto thrust manual override. Now in real world you can always manually override auto thrust. You can always put your hands on the levers and move them as you want. Now in the simulation, however, since your joystick might be sending some small spikes, let me just about show you what I mean. Let's go level change, wait until it's out of retard mode and in arm mode. Here we go. You can see with my joystick being somewhere, that one here is sending some slight spikes. Actually both of them are. And that might just about override your auto thrust at any moment. For that reason, you've got this option, auto thrust manual override, thrust hold or descent arm only. Thrust hold is what you get during takeoff, and descent arm is what we are using in the descent over here, both in VNAV as well as in level change modes. This is my favorite setting because it means that while I'm in auto thrust arm mode, I can use my joystick in order to move my thrust levers. But once we're out of the arm mode, let me just set a certain setting over here. Once we're leveling off, or once I am reverting to a different mode, where auto thrust is once again going to take over, like now, MCP speed. Now the auto thrust is controlling our thrust levers again. And just to show you, if I set this one to never, I could never manually override auto thrust. You can see I'm moving my levers now, but the engines don't respond at all. But here is what's interesting. Let's match those up with the current thrust. If I'm now going into the always mode, that would be very useful if your physical hardware thrust levers could be driven by the airplane. You can see now auto thrust is controlling it, and we're in MCP speed mode. However, when I'm now moving my joystick thrust levers, as you can see right now, I can still override them. When I let go, auto thrust is once again taking control of the thrust levers and moving them as it demands necessary. My personal favorite is in thrust hold and descent arm only. However, all of those modes are something you should be experimenting with in order to get a feel of how to steer your plane a little bit more realistically. So that's going to be it for today's video. I do hope that you found this little insight useful. If you did, do let me know in the comments below, as I'm always looking to read what you guys are thinking about the topic of the videos that I'm choosing, if those are interesting to you, or if you'd prefer some other stuff. Alright, that much for today's video. Thank you very much for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed it, do let me know by pressing that like button, as it does also help with the YouTube algorithms. And be sure to subscribe to the channel for further videos like this. Finally, if you really like what I'm doing, I would appreciate a small donation through the Buy Me Coffee link in the video description below. Thank you very much for watching, and I see you all again on the next one.